Yeah.
All right, we're gonna let them join. We might have a few audience members. As I will explain at the top of this, we have a little society, we like to call it, called the Pensive Peeps Society. It's just like 6 of us who like talking about this stuff. Manny's the only active non-Christian. There are other non-Christians in there that are completely absent.
Post-Christian.
Silent. Post-Christian.
No, but it is a form of non-Christian, but it's also a form of Christian.
Well, maybe we'll debate that.
We need an audience so that we can be more encouraged by our laughs.
Starting to pick up.
All right, so
Manny, all right.
When it turns 8, we have to do a dance that represents our love or lack thereof of Jesus.
Okay, sure. When it turns 8. No, 8 viewers. When it turns 8.
No, it's 8 p.m.
So, is this your dance?
Yep.
Here's mine.
Come on, dance. Do you ever think it's weird?
All
right, so you want to start and like introduce like what we're doing and like what we're trying to do and stuff like that, or I can do that too.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, so Manny, you are in Atlanta at your office.
Yeah. ATL, Atlanta. Represent.
I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay, wait. Do we need to invite them? Can we just invite them in the normal way that we would invite someone to a Google Hangout? Or because you already gave them the link. But like, can I just like, can I invite them? Okay, you can talk and I'll invite them. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, so the way this started.
Wait, I can't. I think you're like the boss. Why don't I talk and you add them? The little plus thing is not here for me.
Maybe I can't. Hold on. We can just let them join.
Maybe you can't.
Oh wait.
Well, I mean, like, I want them to join in the audio.
I can. I can.
Do you not have the plus?
I can't just add them normally.
Why not?
It's probably for their safety since it's still a live stream video, so you can't just
but you should.
And they join.
No, you should be able to invite them.
No, I mean,
just in the same way that you invited me.
Yeah, I mean, I sent.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. No, but like, okay. So if they click the link, then it'll work. If they click the link, then it'll work.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So
it says Facebook.com. It says Facebook.com.
We're already arguing.
Wait, are you sure? Shouldn't it just be the exact same link that you gave me in the one-on-one message?
Oh man,
you gave a weird link that was like a Facebook link.
It should still work.
Let me paste the real one though, or the one that you pasted for me.
That should be the real one.
Sorry for the boredom. All right, guys, we're getting started.
Go ahead, and I'm going to explain this while you do that. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We have 6 viewers now.
Woo!
Doesn't.
That's my favorite number.
So we have this chat. First of all, I was saying I'm in Brooklyn. Otherwise, this would be live, in-person live. Manny and I have been good friends for a long time. We've been talking about these things for a long time. Though I will say, most of the times we would get into these sort of things. Claire is here.
Hey.
Claire is another pensive peep. But anyway, Manny and I would usually not be able to, I would say we would usually not be able to like really dig in, like it would be like out hanging out with friends and we'd start talking about it and talk for 20 minutes and right when it was starting to get good, so, and we've had some written exchanges, so I posted something to our group chat about the resurrection and some points, which I actually posted to the Facebook post as well, if you want to check that out. But it's just some initial arguments for the resurrection and that I wanted get Manny's thoughts on, and that's how we decided to do a debate. So should we do a very quick faith bio, Manny, of like where you are and how you got there? Just a couple minutes.
Yeah, but it should be like really quick.
That's fine. Really quick.
So basically,
the video.
What?
Just really
I think you're fine. I think you should keep it on because otherwise when you talk, it's just, if you are louder than anyone else, it's just going to bring up a big letter C. So so it's not really gonna make a difference if you turn your video off or not. And we want your audio feedback especially. But video is good too, because then if you laugh, we can be encouraged and think that we're funny.
All right, let's get this show on the road.
Okay, so all right, so yeah, when I was about 22, or 21, I guess, I really started doubting, because of things in the Old Testament that were super harsh. Like, for instance, like, okay, in the Old Testament, it's like saying, okay, if you are gathering sticks on the Sabbath, you know, you got to be killed. And it's like, and then like, you know, it's not just the law, but it's also the enforcement. And it's like, there's a specific incident, dude's gathering sticks. Maybe he was just trying to gather some firewood because his family was cold at night. You know, who knows? Like, he didn't quite plan ahead, da 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 da. And then, so it's like, you know, they find him, they grab him, they take him to Moses, and they're like, what should we do? And Moses like gets a word directly from the Lord, supposedly, that like, okay, you got to kill him. So they kill him. And so anyways, there's just all these things in the Bible. Some of them are just offensive to my conscience. Some of them are, or my moral compass, or whatever you want to call it. Others are offensive to my reason. And so it's like there's these internal inconsistencies that I see, which are quite, you know, like fly in the face of what you see in, or what I was taught as a conservative Christian. So I wasn't raised in the mainstream Protestant denomination, but rather an offshoot that was more conservative, and like it was big on infallibility and inerrancy. And so I was just like, this is not infallible, it's not inerrant, like, you know. And it was a gradual conclusion, but it just seemed to make a lot more sense. And then as I thought that this was the case, that it was made by man, I would see more and more problems. And so it's part of my mission to try to encourage, you know, truth telling. And so I do think that there are a lot of falsehoods that are told by you know, evangelical Christians, and I don't think that they're in general bad people, but I do think that it is better for the world to, you know, to not believe, you know, false myths. Although I do think that there are such a thing as true myths, and I think that to have a religious understanding of our universe is not inherently a bad thing. So I'm not like a Richard Dawkins type or a Sam Harris type. I'm someone who really appreciates a lot of aspects about Christianity, but someone who doesn't believe in the miracles. And that was just, you know, a gradual conclusion that I came to. And there's a really big miracle, the resurrection, which I think is didn't happen. And I think that people who argue that, oh, it's really obvious that it did, are in error, and I am just trying to help people get free from error.
I'll applaud that.
Andrew, you can turn your video on too.
Hey, so Andrew's another member of Repentant People.
Feel free to turn your video on too if you want to. Okay.
At the end of this, we're gonna let
Did you
Claire.
get your haircut, Andrew?
Nope. Just been at the beach all week.
Well, it looks great.
Looking great. Been at the beach.
So at the
Maybe
end of this,
tan.
we're gonna let Andrew and Claire give some feedback. Oh, you ask some questions.
Yeah.
Tell us who won. No, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
and they're gonna try to follow the YouTube comments. So if there are any YouTube comments, they can also act as your surrogate.
Sure. Yes.
Or, you know, your mediator, if you will.
Okay.
Our mediator?
You can,
what are you talking?
What?
Anyways. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Robert's gonna speak a little bit about himself, and then we're gonna get into the meat of the matter. What is the phrase I'm looking for?
I think the meat is correct.
Hey, did y'all see Rebecca? Did y'all see Rebecca is talking on Rebecca's commenting on the YouTube video? Should we get her in here, or just us?
Oh, we're gonna
no.
I realize
she's the audience. She's the audience.
Yeah.
She's just an audience.
Just let's keep it as the 4, because otherwise it'll get crazy. And
okay.
But we will try to communicate those questions near the end. Yeah.
Okay.
And you got okay.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get it moving before people are like, are these people just like skirting around? Is this gonna actually happen?
It says there's 6 people watching, so I guess a couple people are watching.
Now 5, Andrew.
Yeah.
Now 5.
Ooh, oh, down to 5. We lost one. We lost one. Y'all said
Because
something.
Robert was moving forward. Robert.
Be smart,
Robert.
really quick. Okay, so to me, well, first of all, it's funny. Like, I would say I pretty much resonated and even agreed with like almost 95% of what you said, Manny. And at this point, even the stuff about the Old Testament and gathering the sticks and all that. So we have a lot of agreement. But for me, I grew up in a Christian home. I would say very conservative as far as like theology, or very strict inerrancy, that sort of thing, young earth creationism. And I've always been very philosophically minded. I've always just wanted to get down to the truth. And so from an early age, I was analyzing things. I wouldn't say questioning so much, questioning individual parts of the faith for sure.
Yeah, but you're an analytical person. You went to Georgia Tech, basically graduated with a 4.0. Woo woo, you did.
Hey, did y'all already kick the debate off and explain? What are y'all doing right now?
We're just introducing ourselves. You
Oh,
were a
you
little
did
bit
introduce
late.
yourself. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but we're about to start debating.
Okay, all right.
All right, so yeah, so for me, it kind of felt like my faith was slowly crumbling piece by piece of like, I started to feel like I was having to give up this part of my belief, you know, as far as like younger creationism stuff. And then, you know, just very strict inerrancy that in one passage, Jesus tells Peter that the rooster will crow 3 times. And another passage, he says 2. And oh no, there's an error. And so it just felt like things were slipping.
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
And so it just felt like I was getting more and more ground, and I kept losing these battles. And so I got to this really low point early in college, or not early in college, really kind of on the later end. And basically at the worst of it, I started to feel like I had almost completely lost my faith. But then as I really started digging more, and particularly the resurrection, things turned around for me. And one thing I'll say, I made some quick notes. So just one thing I wanted to say up top about myself is like, my goal is always to be as honest as possible about the evidence. I can't remove my own bias, of course, but like I decided from a pretty young age, I'd rather be a weak Christian that admitted the evidence was only, let's say, 10% in favor for Christianity. I'd rather be a weak Christian that admitted that than be a falsely
dishonest or disingenuous
Christian who's trying to convince myself that it's 95%, it's 100%. So I think it is better than 10%, but that is always my goal. It's like, and I tried to, one thing that really helped me was to separate my individual, the individual pieces of evidence from my overall belief, and that helped me evaluate each piece of evidence more objectively. So, yeah, so, okay, I think that covers, so yeah, I would say now, you know, I have a much firmer faith, and I still have, you know, questions. I'm not saying I have it all figured out or anything, but I kind of came through that period of severe doubt, and I pruned my faith down to like a bare minimum where it almost disappeared, and then I built it back up on something that felt firm to me. And the resurrection, I think, is part of that, and that's why we're going to talk about it.
Alrighty, so awesome, Robert. Thank you, sir. Now, should I go first since I'm the antagonizer?
Yeah. I was thinking, you know, at first I had posted that stuff on the Facebook chat, but I realized it's going to be easiest just for people watching just to start kind of fresh, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, y'all, I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'm still listening. I'm here.
Okay. But if you laugh, like...
I think I will, too.
Well, no. Because, like, if you laugh, then,
oh my
like,
God.
then, like, all that comes up is your freaking little
Let me turn the camera off.
Come on.
Oh, right. Okay.
You can do little things like cook and stuff.
I need to do 20. 2,000 squats while I'm listening to this. So,
but like literally, like if you don't talk, no, like the video will not be focused on you.
all right.
So just leave it on.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to get it to where. Anyways. Okay. So I'm just gonna say. Okay. Basically, I'm gonna explain like Robert's general viewpoint, and of course, he can correct it, and then I'll just respond to why I disagree. And so, like,
Cool.
He believes that the resurrection is sort of the more likely conclusion because of what we have in the Gospels. And also, Claire, you took your headphones out, and now I can hear myself twice.
Hey,
Well, I can hear myself
something
twice,
changed.
like through you.
Oh,
Sorry.
did it go away? I think it went away.
Don't take your headphones out. Just if you.
I did it.
Well, yeah.
I didn't. I never had headphones on. Oh, whoops.
Oh, I think it's back to normal. I think it's back to normal now.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Don't
Sorry,
take your
guys.
headphones
Sorry,
out. Listen
guys.
to every word of this.
The edited version will be slightly cleaner. Okay, so all right. So basically it's like this. It's like, Robert reads N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright is a great scholar of the New Testament. N.T. Wright is a traditional believer. He may not be a fundamentalist totally, but he certainly believes in the miracles and believes in especially in the resurrection. And he's written, large books which I have not yet read, but Robert is forcing me to, so I'm going to read them. And basically, just for various reasons, he believes that the resurrection is true. And Robert, I think it might be better if you actually bring up some of the specific ones, and then I'll respond to them one at a time. Because you said, well, how can you explain this and how can you explain that? And I can think of them off the top of my head, but it might work better if you mention them kind of one at a time. You don't have to necessarily elaborate tons, but just to throw it out there. I think it might work better.
Yeah. No, I'll start with the big picture, which I think is the most important anyway. And so just to go back to my bio, kind of, as I was questioning,
we don't want to know about you. We want to know about Jesus.
But this gets to it. I'm not going to take long. As I was questioning things, it felt like I kept on losing these battles. That the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and that there's literally no inconsistency, even in the most detailed sense in the Bible. I would literally go on and debate atheists on forums in middle school about this sort of stuff. And I would
in middle school. You were in middle school.
I mean,
you were an advanced youngster. I debated Christians who were in middle school, but that was when I was doing my master's, and they were in middle school.
Right. But anyway, there's one thing looking back at my journey, there's this turning point. And one of the big turning points was once I started studying the resurrection, once I got to the resurrection, it seemed almost like the situation flipped. That all of a sudden it was like the atheists who were on the defense. And I'm talking about, I've watched a ton. That's the number one thing I've done is watch all these William Lane Craig debates and other debates too. So I've heard a ton, probably 50 different atheists give their arguments for atheism. Yeah. And a lot for
you're not about to hear 51 because I'm not an atheist.
Sure.
I'm atheist.
Also liberal Christians as well, very liberal Christians, who don't believe in the resurrection really. So and all of a sudden I realized this has swapped. All of a sudden it seems like it fits that it really happened. All things being equal, obviously you have to allow for miracles for that. So, we'll have to table that for a second. But all things being equal, just the bare evidence, it seemed like, holy crap, this happened. The disciples are telling the truth. And it's the atheists who are coming up with these really ad hoc explanations. And to me, it was exactly the same, but in reverse, as atheists saying, look, there's this inconsistency in the Bible, and Christians being like, well, if you interpret this Greek word in this one way,
now, I see.
In this one time, and it's sure, but it just doesn't fit. It's the square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
So
exactly. You're stretching the bounds of reason because you want to stay faithful to your presupposition.
Yeah.
So that's what happens with fundamentalist Christians and with these apparent contradictions, which I believe are actual contradictions, and I believe that you grant that as well. And Andrew doesn't because he's a fundamentalist.
It's true.
This debate.
I wanted to read
now. Are you debating me now?
No, I'm just teasing you. Totally different.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to read a very quick quote from Surprised by Joy, C.S. Lewis. And this is how I felt about it. He said, early in 1926, the hardest boiled of all the atheists I ever knew sat in my room on the other side of the fire and remarked that the evidence for the historicity of the Gospels was really surprisingly good. Rum thing, he went on, all that stuff of Fraser's about the dying God, rum thing. It almost looks as if it really happened once. To understand the shattering impact of it, you would need to know the man who has certainly never since shown any interest in Christianity. If he, the cynic of cynics, the toughest of toughs, were not, as I would have put it, safe, where could I turn? So, and that's exactly how I felt. All of a sudden, it just seems like after my own study of the resurrection stuff, and I've studied a decent number of atheist stuff, but I definitely, I've poured on, more, Christian side, but I've heard a lot of atheists. It just seems like it's a square peg in a round hole to come up with the naturalistic responses, and literally all pieces of data fit perfectly if it really happened. That doesn't prove it, but my goal for tonight would be to get to see if you would acknowledge that. So
I won't, but I will try my darndest. I will try my darndest to do.
Should I go into some specifics?
Yes, let's talk about specifics. Yes, specifics.
All right, so
like the things that are like, okay, if you have a certain kind of, naturalistic explanation, like how can I explain this? How can I explain that? Like things that you mentioned in the thread.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna go down a quick little list, but then we can pick one to focus on if we want to.
No, don't do a list. I think it'll be much more helpful. For the just give one. Just choose one that you like. It could be your one that you think is the best, one that you think is medium. I think it'd be better because they're coming. The plan was to have a debate, right? Not just have distinct monologues.
Sure. No, well, I can't just give one little thing. Let me just give a couple of things.
Yeah, sure. Okay, sure.
Because one of my main points is one little thing is not going to do it, obviously. So, but anyway, so there's been
But even world famous baseball pitchers put on their pants one leg at a time. You can go.
Moving on.
We're gonna have to address them one at a time. Just go.
All right. Go. So, all right. Just some of the bigger ones. One of the big things that's happening in scholarship is there's been a couple of key facts about the resurrection that have become almost universally accepted among all scholarship, like atheists, Christian, everything. And that's, it's easy to pick that to focus on. So one of the big ones is the empty tomb.
No, I don't think that's universally acknowledged.
I was about to say that tends to be more majority. It's not as universal.
But the majority of New Testament scholars are Christian. People go into that study for a reason. So that even just saying the majority of New Testament scholars, it's something that is a little bit more nuanced than you would grant. But that's fine. That's fine. Like empty tomb. Okay, we can talk about that in a little bit. Yeah.
Well, that to me, yeah. We can talk about the reasons they believe it, but it's not fair to say, oh, just because the majority are Christian of some form or another, that you can just throw out that piece of evidence, because a lot of these Christians, here's an example of the vast.
It's like an ad hominem.
Yes, but not just
I agree that it's not the strongest argument, but there's something to it.
It's not just that. The vast majority of scholars reject the story of the guards at the tomb when they say we should go tell them the disciples stole the body. Vast majority of scholars. So reject that. So these are critical scholars, is my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I just think that okay. I just think that we're gonna somewhat have to talk about specifics, because it's just hard. When some particular scholars who I've read give very plausible explanations for give very strong arguments that there was not an empty tomb, then it's like, it's for me, I can't just say, okay, the majority of scholars. I mean, you can say it and you can keep going. I'm just saying, I think we should depend as infrequently as we can on the consensus thing, and more argue about the particulars. That's just my
Sure. I think it's important just to set the stage. If you give one argument, like I just give the argument, people are like, wait, did you just read that from one dude? And it's like, no, this is like a big deal in critical scholarship, you know?
Okay,
so,
sure.
I hear you. I'm trying to find, I had a quote about the empty tomb, but I can't find it right now. Anyway, so, all right, so the empty tomb, majority of scholars, you know, it's pretty well established. And then, so let's see, I'm trying to, oh, wait a minute. I mean, the second biggest thing is really the resurrection appearances. And that is universally acknowledged. Like, I've never heard a single atheist, unless it was someone who actually denied the existence of Jesus himself, which almost doesn't exist. Everyone pretty much agrees that there were these resurrection appearances. So the question becomes more, how do you explain the resurrection appearances? And so let's just start with this.
Yeah, agreed that. I do agree with that about the appearances. Some appearances did happen for sure. Like, yeah, I agree about that.
Okay.
I just, I take them to be, I believe you can explain these appearances from a naturalistic perspective. But yeah.
So, but just to explain, I'm gonna come back to that, but it's just, the thing is, as far as the cumulative case, just a few other things to highlight real quick, and then we come right back. The resurrection was a completely peripheral belief to Judaism until, but Christianity immediately became front and center. So that's kind of remarkable. This idea that someone could be resurrected in the middle of history was a foreign idea to Judaism, and it would have been much more natural to the followers of Jesus to believe that Jesus was exalted in heaven, but they didn't say that. They said he was resurrected. And another example would be.
Wait, what was the last thing you said?
Oh, just that.
It'd be more natural.
It'd be much more natural for the Jesus's followers to say, "Oh, he's been exalted in heaven." Like if they had a vision of him, they would say he's in Abraham's bosom.
Yeah.
That's not what they said. They said he was raised again. And oh crap! Now I've lost. Well, we can start with the vision.
Let's start. Okay. All right. So the visions. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So the visions. I mean, one of the big things about the visions is you have this witness of Paul, which Bart Ehrman says goes back to between 1 and 2 years after the crucifixion. So like everyone agrees this is Paul and that he's claiming this list of eyewitnesses to Jesus at raised. So the question is, what happened? You know, like
but the writing itself, the writing was not made within 1 to 2 years of.
No, but I'm talking about the source. The source of that tradition, Bart Ehrman says 1 to 2 years. Like this is universally.
Yeah, I remember. Like I've read this too. It's kind of like a creed.
Yes.
Right. That is.
I don't think anyone questions that.
Yeah. Okay.
So now, yeah. Let's just start here. We have this situation where you have two people, Paul and James, who were not believers before they saw Jesus, who completely did.
James isn't mentioned in the creed that you're referring to.
Is he not?
Cephas, aka Peter, is. Okay. And then Paul mentions himself, and then he mentions the 500.
I'm not sure. Well, he mentions the 12 as well, which.
We could be thinking of different passages.
I'm pretty sure he mentions the 12, but
I don't think so.
Okay,
but maybe
maybe
no, he maybe did. I mean, we could be thinking of different passages. I'm googling. You keep talking.
The key thing is you have these appearances. You have someone who believes something, who was not, was persecuting Christians, who immediately did this U-turn. Like everyone agrees with that. So why did that happen? And not only that, they have the citations of the other people.
Sorry, yeah. The 12 are in there. I apologize for that. Yeah.
So
okay.
So what would be your explanation for that?
Okay, so like the U-turn. I mean, okay, so for one thing, like there are phenomenal things that happen, right? There are things that are very unlikely that happen. But I guess how I could maybe explain that is maybe like let's say that Jesus was a great example of what we are supposed to be like as humans, because like I believe in God, and so like I believe that we as humans are made in the image of God, and that we have this like knowledge of good and evil, and that there's right and there's wrong and there is sin, and and there's holiness, and there's attempts at holiness, and there's self-righteousness, and all of these Christian concepts. Perhaps what was happening was that Paul was obviously a very strong student of his Bible, the Hebrew Bible, which we call the Old Testament, and he believed it ardently, and so he was like basically like obsessed with honoring God. He was obsessed with it. He had to be obsessed with it, or else he wouldn't have persecuted the heretics. And so if he's persecuting the heretics and he's thinking a lot about God, he's obviously quite intelligent and sort of creative, because we have, all these letters from him that are, showing a great intellect and a great creative mind as well. And so, he's like in the midst of persecuting them. And then, let's say that like he has this like underlying guilt that he feels. Like he's literally like putting them into prison. He's literally like sentencing some of them to death, perhaps. And like maybe he has this like underlying sense of guilt, but he's suppressing it, because that's what a lot of us do. Like when we're doing something we have like these conflicting ethical systems within ourselves, and so we kind of suppress the guilt. And let's say that like from becoming very familiar with the Christian sect, he also became familiar with Jesus's teachings. And then maybe some of these teachings were resonating with him, but then he didn't, like he still wanted to suppress this as well. And then we know that he was a Pharisee, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, one of the important like distinguishing characteristics between those two sects were that the Pharisees did believe in the resurrection. They did believe that we would all be raised, that the dead would be raised, and that there would be a judgment of all humans in the history of humankind. So he did believe in the resurrection, and he did see that these people were claiming that Jesus was raised from the dead. And so maybe he was maybe like Jesus's ethical spirit and Jesus's parables and things like this that he was becoming exposed to started resonating with him. And then as they're resonating with him, the guilt of hurting these pretty innocent people, these people who maybe were illustrating a sort of brotherly love, maybe that he didn't see that often, the guilt of persecuting them was also building up. And then it sort of was, crystallized in a vision. And so that vision may have been a daytime vision, like as we have portrayed in the New Testament. It may have actually been a dream. Maybe the story was modified slightly. But like there are these really like intense things that we see. Like I don't know that I believe in like the apocalypse anymore, but I have had extremely vivid and dreams about like the coming of the apocalypse. Like the clouds are like opening up, and there's this like sense of awe and like dread. And so, if I were maybe a different person, then I would say, wow, I literally saw a preview of Judgment Day, and damn, I better like repent and come back to Christianity, or else I'm gonna like go to hell. And so then all of a sudden I would take a U-turn, but I would take a U-turn in a way that is totally compatible with a naturalistic perspective. That's a dream. We know we have dreams. We know we have very vivid dreams. We also have daytime hallucinations, and they're more common than people might think, and they're common for people that are not even schizophrenic. And so, anyways, all that is like all that's some of my explanation for that particular U-turn. And then maybe as he did make the U-turn, and then as he started reading more about or getting to know more about Jesus' teaching, they really touched him, and he felt like this is it, this is the fulfillment, and he was very excited. And so then he went on to spread the word as he believed this risen Christ had commanded him to.
Well, okay, that's interesting. But first, you're basically, this doesn't mean it's untrue, but you're basically inventing all that. Like, you don't get that any of that from scripture.
But see, like, okay. So the thing is, I have to try to form an explanation. You're challenging me to form an explanation.
Yes,
and then
of course.
I'm saying this is a hypothetical way in which this can fit. And the reason that I think that it's false is not because of that one story in isolation. It's because of a lot of untrustworthy things in the Bible as a whole, and also by early Christians, not just Christians that made it into the New Testament, but slightly later Christians who told even wilder tales. And all of these things they are claiming to be true. So it makes me a little bit skeptical of early Christians in general, because they seem prone to make things up. And they also, they had an expectation. There was a time of expectation. Like
okay, you're going very far left field about other Christians and making up stories. Like, sticking with Paul, first, I just need, like, you are inventing this whole story. Like, that is not what Paul explains his own journey to faith. Like, Paul explains it in a way that implies it was a dramatic, sudden thing, that this vision came out of nowhere as he was persecuting Christians. So you're
and I'm trying to explain it from a psychological perspective. I'm saying sometimes when you say things come out of nowhere, they don't. Sometimes you might be drinking a little, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, about your girlfriend that broke up with you 3 years ago, and then you call her, and everything works out magically, and da 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 da. But maybe it didn't happen out of nowhere. Maybe there are these like things that were in your heart for a while that you've kind of suppressed. I'm saying like that is an explanation that I'm offering, which makes sense to me, and I like you. Cannot handle cognitive dissonance, so I have to make an attempt at an explanation.
I'm not faulting you for making an attempt. That's fine. But I just want to point out, like, before moving on to whatever else, that you're adding something, and not just adding something. You're not just filling in gaps. You're changing it from the natural reading of what Paul says happened to him. And I'm not even talking about as far as a vision, but just as far as his journey, how he became a Christian. And so. Yeah. And there's two other, like, I think we should move to the empty tomb to a degree, because you have that, and also you have all these other people having visions. And hallucinations do not happen over extended period of time to multiple different groups. That doesn't.
Well, I'd like to.
Phenomenon. So,
that's not true at all. Virgin Mary has done that many times, and I've just been reading about it recently.
I mean, I would be interested to, send me, like, I think I said this before when you brought it up, send me the articles about that. But like a group hallucination repeatedly with different parties over extended period of time, that is pretty much a complete unknown. Like, we don't.
No, that's not true. Like, if you read the stories about the Virgin Mary, there are tons of documented group appearances.
Mary, like, walking up and being physical right in front of. And I'm not talking about over thousands of years where you have enough time.
No, I'm talking about in the 20th century. Like, there are these like stories. So anyways, like, we'll talk about that in a second. But like, back to the Paul thing, and like making like the less natural explanation. Like, it's like okay, so I have a friend who's very charismatic. Very charismatic Christian. And this is back when I was a Christian, but I was never like a charismatic kind of person. And so like when he would talk about like, okay, so like he would pray that like, God, wake me up exactly at 5:32 a.m. Just like because like he felt like God loved him so much, he was really happy to show him, to himself every day. And so it's like okay, cool. And he woke him at 5:32. It's like I just don't believe it. He tells a lot of stories. He tells a lot of crazy stories, and you have a lot of these things. And so it's like okay, yeah, there's a less natural explanation, and it's like okay, like I don't know what I could think of an explanation, but I don't believe that story, and I also don't believe the story that he told me about when a witch, that is to say, like a girl who was practicing Wicca, when she came to Christ, like there was this incident where like she ran over a cat, and this cat was clearly dead, flat as a pancake, a white, flat pancake, bam, obviously dead. And she prayed, and she said, "Please God, don't let me have killed that cat. Please God, don't let me have killed that cat." And so then the cat poofs up like a marshmallow, like a cotton ball, and walks away. And so this is a story from this particular friend, and these kinds of stories are told very often within these charismatic circles. And so it's like for me, I have to think of an explanation. So it's like, what is my explanation? It's like, well, maybe the cat wasn't quite flat. Maybe she sort of exaggerated that. Da 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 da.
Sure, it's
like,
still this.
but you can say, oh, that's not like natural. It's like it's me trying to do the best to apply my worldview, which is which I attempt to make cohesive, and it's to try to apply it to particular little chinks in this worldview, which I think there are far fewer chinks in my worldview than yours. But anyways, sorry to be defensive there.
Yeah, that's what it's about. But like this is a very extreme example. It's over a short period of time, like I think 50 days or whatever, and the short period of time he's appearing in groups in dramatic ways, not seeing something in the clouds, not seeing blood drip from a statue. Like I think it is hard. I would challenge you to find something equivalent to these stories.
But see, okay. The problem is like all of these stories are stories. They may be true stories and they may be false stories. But
sure,
if you look at the resurrection stories, like they are very different from each other. They contain many discrepancies, which some of which are mutually exclusive, and also these stories by the gospel writers were written like a long time after Paul.
This is getting far out to left field. Like I'm talking about the material that Bart Ehrman says goes back to 2 years after the crucifixion. That's not affected by your.
But see, that is also, it is a tradition, right? So it's like if okay, so it's 500 people. That's a lot of people. So like.
And why did they believe? I need to add this. I need to add this. This is important. Why did they believe he was resurrected when what they should have believed was that he was exalted in heaven? Resurrection was not an option for an individual in the middle of history. And secondly, other messiahs, would-be messiahs, had these sort of movements and were killed by the authorities, and none of their followers ever claimed they were resurrected. This happened multiple times, and no one ever claimed it except for the Christians. So,
well, I mean, maybe Jesus was way cooler than they were.
Well, why resurrection? Why didn't they say God has proven him to be his son even, because we have seen a vision of him in heaven? But that's not what they said. They said he was resurrected. Why would they say that?
Well, okay, so you have tons of testimonies of people who people have these experiences of like a loved one, and sometimes it's like a religious figure like the Virgin Mary or Jesus, and other times it's a loved one, could be family, could be friends, and they can even supposedly touch them, right?
Sure.
And so they talk about these things, and they believe that they don't believe it's a vision, and they don't always believe that like okay, like he's in heaven. Like they believe that like that person visited me from the dead, and I'm happier now because I have peace, or whatever that might be. And in the book of How Jesus Became God by Bart Ehrman, there are tons and tons of answers to these exact same questions. So one thing, this is more just like a general point, is kind of like if you would like me to read the books about the resurrection from N.T. Wright, I'm happy to, but
I think we should trade.
But I think that we should try that. But like, okay, so for instance, like, so
that was not, so N.T. Wright goes he spends like 300 pages surveying ancient beliefs of what happens after death. And he makes one of his points is that when people knew about these visions that you're talking about of loved ones, like we've always known about this, they weren't dumb, they knew about that, and it proved that person was dead, not alive. Like when they saw someone come back, that meant, oh, that means they're in, you know, I'm seeing a vision of them to make me feel better. That it never would have made them say, oh, he's back alive again, even though he died on a tree, which means he was cursed by God and said, God has forsaken me as his last words. Like, it's just this belief out of nowhere that changed how Paul thought about the resurrection and the resurrection.
So do you think, I mean, one thing like that was interesting from a more modern study of these experiences with, you know, like the dead, you know, like dead loved ones, is that many of the people did not know that it was fairly common to have such visionary experiences. They actually thought that they were unique. So I kind of find it hard to believe that the average ancient person who was way, way, way less literate than we are, who didn't have the internet, didn't have Wikipedia, you know, if you ever see a dead loved one, that always means that they're in heaven. It never means that they've come back from the dead.
Yeah, I disagree completely, because back then stories got around more easily, so they were more likely to think these things.
Stories I mean, what do you mean stories got around more easily? Stories changed more easily because there weren't like written records.
Magic and stuff. Don't you agree they were more likely to believe in magic, and that?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and this is a case of believing in magic.
But my point, okay, great, it's magic. Why did they think the magic was resurrection instead of Jesus being in heaven? Like that was
because that was a big point that he made about, like, that was a big point where he has a whole freaking, you know, argument that's recorded in the Gospels about it. And he says, like, and like the Sadducees who don't believe in the resurrection, they're saying, okay, so then what happens when the man who marries his wife and then the man dies and then the brother marries his wife, everybody knows that story. And then, so what happens?
But that's at the end of time. He says in the resurrection time.
No. Like he says, like, in the resurrection, and there are many, many places in the New Testament which imply that Jesus is actually saying that, you know, the end of the world is coming soon, and not just Jesus, but Paul. And so, and not just Jesus and Paul, but many apocalypticists, many Jewish apocalypticists believed that the end of the world was coming soon. And so if the end of the world was coming soon, and if the resurrection comes at the end of the world, then the resurrection is coming soon. And so, as Paul says, he's the first fruits of the resurrection. And so then it is not this crazy huge leap as you know, and your fellow Christian apologists would like to argue. It's you know, like, and also there are these
John Dominic Crossan also admitted it's a big leap, and he's doesn't believe in the bodily resurrection. So it's not just Christian apologists.
But see, there are things that are called like religious innovations, right? So it's like, you could say, like, okay, so like how did Jesus, like, okay, so how could Jesus, a Jew, say things like okay, or like, you know, how could you know, like, what's another person, like, okay, you know, Buddha, he was living in, you know, a certain society, and then he threw all that away. Like, that doesn't make sense within the context of society. It's like, well, there are these things called geniuses. Like, there are people that are geniuses, and I would say Jesus was a genius. And I would say, you know, even though I disagree with Paul in certain, like, little deductive reasonings that he makes, like, I would say he was a genius too. And so he elaborated on a belief, and he, you know, he had creative individual aspects of that, you know, like, you know, how could Einstein, like, just have a vision and compare him and imagine himself running by a ray of light and thinking, how can I go any faster than this? That's literally, like, he had a vision, and that's where he came to conclude, yes, the speed of light is constant, and so many other things followed from that. And so you can say, well, how could that be in the context of early 20th century physics that, you know, someone would have this innovative idea? It's like, well, sometimes people do have innovative ideas. And so I don't think it's...
But there's a reason for the innovative idea. And I'm saying the reason is Jesus was bodily there. And they're like, holy crap, someone just got resurrected. This wasn't supposed to happen until the end of time. Like, so I'm just saying,
they
what's
thought
your
the end of time
explanation
was
for that
coming
shift?
soon. They thought that the end of time was coming soon. So if you look at Matthew 24,
but still, that didn't allow for
Jesus
an
is quoted.
to be
Jesus
resurrected
is
before
quoting.
that.
Jesus is quoting, saying that, you know, he's quoted saying that, like, that within a generation, all these things will happen. The stars will fall to the ground. You know,
Sure.
the moon will become red as blood. You know, there will be great earthquakes, and there will be, and then he says, like, and so he was an apocalypticist. And so a lot of Jews in that time were apocalypticists. So they thought the end of the world was coming soon. They thought that the resurrection was going to be close to the end of the world. So therefore, when they see a vision of Jesus, who they loved, who they cherished, who they were expecting him to usher in this grand new kingdom, this kingdom of peace, this kingdom of righteousness, this kingdom where the Jews weren't going to be, you know, smashed by the Romans and humiliated and all of these things. So that's what they're expecting, because that's what Jesus taught. That's what John the Baptist taught. And then they see him. And so when they see him and they start talking, then it's not far-fetched to say that he's risen. He's not here anymore, so he's ascended. And so, like, he's risen, and this is the resurrection. This is the beginning, guys. This is the beginning of the end. And that kind of excitement, I believe, is what a lot of, you know, the success of early Christianity. And I don't think it's a far-fetched explanation.
I think, okay, well, I mean, this is definitely a case where we might just have to trade books, but like, I think you are misrepresenting Second Temple Judaism. I think you're misrepresenting the possibility. You're making, oh, well, yeah, they could just include resurrection all of a sudden when I don't think.
Okay. So two questions that you could answer for me. So one, did many Jews of that time expect that the world was going to end soon?
I'm not sure the common thought on that.
Many Jews.
That makes sense to me because
so like the Dead Sea Scrolls like were discovered, and all of those Jews which were not Christians, they all believed that the end of the world was imminent. And so it's kind of interesting. We don't find that many books that are that old, and when we do, okay, well, it's people who thought the end of the world was coming right freaking now, and they were living in caves with this expectation. And so
still, it doesn't. But I want to move on.
Not only that, but Jesus's followers were apocalypticists, and so you can't say okay, like, was it common amongst all Jews? It's like, okay, well, they weren't all Jews. These were Jesus's followers. Jesus taught the impending coming of the Son of Man. He taught the impending coming of a new kingdom. He taught that, you know, the world was going to be turned on its head, and he also taught the resurrection, and he taught that, you know, in this time, the dead will be raised and the dead will be judged. So it's not hard to believe that a large number of people who were already following him and some people who were not already following him were saying, okay, like, the world is coming to an end. Jesus didn't let us down. This was all part of God's plan. Then they start looking at the Old Testament and trying to find all these things that match, you know, their perception of what Jesus was supposed to do. And so I just don't think it's a far-fetched explanation, and we can just like agree to disagree. But
well, okay, I think first of all, it's stretching what was capable for a Jew at that time to believe, but we will just have to
wait. Like a Jew, like Jesus's followers, like they themselves believe. Okay, so they believed that the end of the world was coming soon.
Maybe I'm not.
I would say no.
Andrew,
sorry.
Well, but like, even if they did,
what? Okay,
they
so
were
like,
all
it says like all this is coming within a generation. Like, what was going to happen within a generation? Like, we have it in Matthew. It says within a generation. What was supposed to happen within a generation?
The destruction of the temple.
Andrew, we'll talk at the end.
But like Robert, what do you think that it is? Like, what do you think that they expected when he was talking about these really cataclysmic, these really apocalyptic?
Manny, I don't disagree with you on this. Like, they could have thought that. My point is, there would be one person who is raised like that in the middle. That was not a part of their theology, and it was still.
It was a part of the theology because Jesus made the theology. He was the master. They were the followers.
When did Jesus say? So you think Jesus predicted his resurrection? That's a pretty big deal.
No, I think that he was predicting the coming of the Son of Man, which actually, according to what I've been reading, was a figure distinct from himself in his perspective. But that's a different issue for a different day. He was predicting the end of the world. His followers were following him. Therefore, they thought the end of the world was coming. They also thought that the resurrection was coming at the end of the world. So, like, why is it such a stretch?
All right, maybe. So let me even grant that it's only a little stretch. I think it's still a stretch that they would think that about Jesus. But you do have other problems. You do have the fact that that all of a sudden resurrection becomes a central belief of, for no apparent reason except they thought.
No, there was a very apparent reason because Jesus was the center of their ministry. Jesus told them to go out two by two, to go out two by two and to dedicate their whole lives.
Jesus didn't make resurrection the center of his ministry.
Okay, but he made himself, he himself in the new kingdom. So they were dedicated in a very significant way to him. So if they believed that he rose, then of course this would become a central element of their.
Yes. So, okay. So I guess really that is to show that they really believed he rose, was risen for body. So
yes, but what's interesting about that is that what this doubt tradition, and this is, I'm just ripping off another author, no originality here, but like this doubt tradition. So it's like, it's kind of interesting that Jesus had to prove himself so many times. And so it's kind of like if I saw someone and there were like 10 other people with me who saw him too, and we were all hanging out for a while, it seems interesting that like you continue to doubt. So it's like, there's a lot of these things about the disciples doubting, and there's also these extremely stringent penalties, extreme penalties for not believing. So in one of the Gospels at the end, Jesus is quoted as saying, and this is in Mark, and so he's saying like, and for those who believe and be baptized will be saved, and for those who do not believe, they will be condemned. So we're talking about heaven and hell here, and we're talking about a passage at the end of Mark, which interestingly was not in the original Gospel of Mark. And so what you have here is you have Christians being deceitful in this or that way. So, and even if they didn't think they were being deceitful, they're just tacking on an end because it's like, okay, it's the Gospel of Mark. If they believe that Mark wrote it, then they're just kind of they don't have a little note. Oh, by the way, we added this onto the Gospel of Mark, and there's all these weird things that are definitely I do not see. It says like, for anyone who believes, all these signs will follow them. They will drink poison and they will not be harmed.
I know.
They will be bitten by snakes.
This is all irrelevant because
they will heal. No, it's relevant because it's about the general trustworthiness of these early Christians and the general trustworthiness of their testimony.
Even if it's like try to take away from the general trustworthiness, I'm talking about the stuff that the most liberal scholars accept, which is the resurrection.
See, that's not true because Bart Ehrman is the one I've been reading, and he used to be a fundamentalist Christian, and he gradually became a liberal Christian, and then he became an agnostic. And so but
that's the facts I'm talking about. He accepts.
No, you're saying he accepts that was an early creed.
Yes, and I think
he doesn't accept that. that 500. He doesn't believe that 500. No, he believes that a small number of people saw Jesus, including Peter and Mary Magdalene and maybe a couple others. He believes that it was a very small group, and he believes that that some of the disciples didn't believe him, and that they didn't all go on to like spread his message. Maybe half of them did, but and he believes that Paul saw him, and so he does believe that these appearances happened, but he doesn't believe that he doesn't believe that 500 saw them at the same time, and
why not?
And so,
if we accept that part of the Bible, which scholars accept, I'm sure Bart Ehrman accepts that was in there, that it says 500. So does he think Paul was just lying?
Well, he was invoking a tradition, right? And so that tradition was that that he inherited, right? We both agree that this was like an early creed. And so, so there's
which
some
Bart Ehrman says
about
within 2 years of the crucifixion, that he got within 2 years of the crucifixion.
Okay, so a lot of things can happen when you have people who are more quote unquote superstitious, and so
so they just included 500. The 500 people saw.
It's a big number. I mean, okay. So here's an example of people making things up. So what about the ending of Mark? Was that made up? Was that what
that's later. That could have been 200 years later.
Okay, but
I'm talking about 2 years after the crucifixion. Everyone's still alive.
Why do?
And they died for something.
We do not have 500 people who. We do not have a claim of 500 people. We have a tradition that 500 people saw Jesus, and so here's the thing: if the people at the end of Mark, for the sake of argument, let's say that was totally made up. Some Christian decided this makes sense. Jesus would have said this. We do have these superpowers. So suppose that was totally made up. What is the difference between someone making something up in AD 80 and someone making something up in 80 whatever 30 something?
First of all, we're talking about 80-33, not 80-80. And
I'm saying AD 80. I'm saying AD 80 for the Markan accretion, or AD 100. Why?
There's
if people are prone to make something up within a particular tradition, it's where what if they didn't inherit?
You're talking about a 50-year difference. That's way more.
The point is
years.
The point is that, but see, we don't have this. We don't have. Okay, what's kind of interesting about
First of all, I think
500 people.
I think Bart Ehrman might be the only who denied the 500 happened. So, go ahead.
Okay. So we can talk about that later. I don't see how a claim of 500 is equivalent to a reality of 500. But
I'm not saying it's reality. I'm saying that 500 thought. Oh, okay. Reality that even 500 thought they saw, right?
But why do you think that 500 people, why do you think that because one person says 500, that is the same as 500 people testifying?
I'm not saying it's absolutely for sure, but I'm saying you need a reason to
I do have a reason that people were making lots of things up in those times, and they were doing it not for no reason. They were doing it for reasons, but the reasons were not necessarily that they wanted to tell.
Paul was duped. So are you saying Paul was lying or Paul was duped?
I'm saying Paul was duped. Yeah.
So within 2 years,
I'm saying
and he doesn't try to talk to any of the 500, and he never hears about how that was just made up.
Okay, so when does he? I mean, he doesn't even that. Okay, so look.
My point is, this is square peg and round hole. You might be right, but you're coming at it about it was very strange.
Okay. So here. Okay, let me grant you that point, and let me give you some square pegs for your round holes.
Okay.
Okay, so do you know that no one wrote about the resurrection outside of the Christians?
What do you mean? Oh, about Jesus' resurrection?
So Jesus is not mentioned by any Roman or Greek sources before the 2nd century AD.
Sure.
So approximately, okay. so he, so then within Judaism, we basically have like Josephus, right? And
Yep.
Josephus doesn't say anything about like him being raised from the dead.
He does mention Jesus though. And arguably,
he
mentions that some say he was a Christ. That part is disputed. I know that.
That is disputed, and it is certainly interesting that it's disputed, right? Because Josephus was Jewish, and he was not considered to be Christian. So it'd be interesting that he would claim that Jesus was Christ.
Yeah, he didn't say no. That's the interpolation that everyone thinks. I think one theory is that it's that the original was that some say it is the Christ or something like that. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
So if 500 people, like saw Jesus resurrected. So Jesus also is said in one part of the New Testament to have been on earth for 40 days.
Sure.
Before he's ascended. So if he was on there for 40 days, then why didn't other people talk about it? People say like, oh, you could just go back to the tomb and say, oh, it's not empty. But it's like, oh, it's even better. He's there for 40 whole days. And so it's like, okay, he's there for 40 days. He appears to 500 people. And it's like, and yet no one outside of these Christians who already, who basically already believe that Jesus was the Christ, no one outside of them makes a note of it. They don't even make a note. And in one of the Gospels, it said that many people were resurrected when Jesus was crucified. Not when Jesus was raised, but when the earth shook.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in Matthew. And so we have all these interesting, crazy events. And so how do you explain like how other people didn't write about these things?
Okay, well, first of all, sure. I especially agree about the Matthew account. Obviously, most scholars don't accept that. And so
what do you mean accept that? Like accept that it happened, or you mean accept that it was claimed by the original gospel, or what?
Well, I guess I don't know. I guess most accept that
because
Matthew wrote it, but
because if Matthew wrote it, I mean, if it was in the like whoever was the author of Matthew, which according to Ehrman was not Matthew, but let's call him Matthew for simplicity. So like if that wasn't true, how was that claimed? Like, do you think that tons of people made up? Or like, why would you make up so many people? Like it said many were raised, and so it's like maybe some person had one vision, or like how do you explain like these things? Did people make them up? Did people what was happening there?
So I haven't studied that particular passage much. It's definitely one of the strangest things in the Gospels is that one thing in Matthew. Mm-hmm. And some conservative scholars think that Matthew was kind of writing, I don't know if apocalyptic is the right word, but that he was slipping into like a more poetic sort of thing.
It's so convenient. It's just so convenient. Like that is exactly what you're accusing me of. Like the more natural interpretation is that Matthew is saying this happened while Jesus was crucified. And it's just like, oh, he's all of a sudden like, he goes into poetry because there's these things that, well, they probably historically happened.
I think there needs to be a reason to think he went into that. Like I said, I haven't studied that one enough. Maybe we'll have to make a note of that one to come back.
But like, what about like?
I was gonna just come back to you saying why don't other people write about Jesus' resurrection? Because I feel like that's a more pressing thing. Well, I feel like this is first of all.
Like even just like to say like that many people claimed that he was raised. No one even said like even an unbeliever might say, oh, many people claimed he was raised, but no one outside.
The church. I mean, what I'm saying is the church started extremely small, and then once it got big enough, that people knew.
40 days of a dead man walking on the earth.
He wasn't hanging in someone's living room. He was like, according to the passages, he was like disappearing and reappearing. He wasn't just like teaching around the town.
Okay, well here's another question. Like if God like really wanted me to believe that he raised Jesus and that he was his son, like wouldn't it have been like why it's a little convenient that he like ascended so quickly. Like in some passages it seems like he ascended quite quickly. In other passages it's 40 days. But there are lots of discrepancies between these stories, and so the discrepancies testified to me that they are not eyewitness testimony. Because if this really happened and if it was really eyewitness testimony, then there would be fewer discrepancies. And I know, and I'm not saying eyewitnesses don't disagree. I'm saying that when they do disagree, we tend to doubt the testimony of one or more of the eyewitnesses. And so simply to doubt it is not a kind of oh, I'm turning my eyes away from Jesus. I'm turning my eyes away from the truth. It's a natural thing to doubt testimonies that disagree with each other, to say someone is making something up.
Well, first
Maybe
of all,
everyone,
the
maybe
resurrection,
someone.
they often agree in the essentials. It's usually the details that there's these discrepancies. And like I gave in the example, the survivors of the Titanic disagreed if the ship split in half or not. Like, that is a huge deal, and they disagree over that. And so
but that's one example, and I'm talking about like in court. In court, we typically.
Let me give another point really quick. Another point before you continue, then you can have the floor. The very fact that we have these discrepancies proves that we have multiple sources for these events. If it was one source, it would be all together, all consistent.
Yeah. So it seems yes, there are multiple sources, and so like in Ehrman's exposition of kind of what we need to reconstruct the historical Jesus, he gives a few things of what we like, what is preferable. Okay, so
right.
the earlier the better, right? That makes sense. It's eyewitness. The sooner it is, the better. He also says, what we want is independence of sources, but corroboration of the facts. And so the independence, that's true. Yeah, that's true. There were different traditions, but when they do not corroborate each other in many, many details, then it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe it didn't actually happen. And it's just like, it's kind of like, it's like, okay, yeah, we have independent sources, and certain things are corroborated by independent sources. And so, for example, like, was Jesus from Nazareth? Yes.
So do you think Jesus never told any parables because there's differences in the parables? Do you think Jesus never taught and never told these parables and all that? Just
the differences are much smaller in those cases. And not only that, like okay, so like, was Jesus from Nazareth? Yes. And according to the scholars, like the testimonies, and also there's the other thing, which is called the the principle of dissimilarity. It's like whenever something whenever something is against the supposed Christian or the apparent Christian theology of the time, then it is more likely to be something that Jesus said. And so one example that Bar Ehrman gives is when Jesus is talking about people basically going to heaven or hell based on how much they helped out their neighbors. And so that is actually contrary to the general theology of the early Christianity, the sheep and the goats parable, and so that is contrary to early Christian theology, because Paul expounded quite extensively and eloquently about being saved by faith. And so Jesus,
what does that have to do with the resurrection? And
it's basically, what I'm trying to get to is that like we have stuff that is independent and that is corroborated. So like the detail of Jesus being from Nazareth. And then we have stuff that is independent and not corroborated. And so like we have two stories about him being from Bethlehem, and those stories differ in very, very many details. And it also makes sense given their desire for Jesus to be a son of David. And so then that's an example of people making stuff up. And so then when we have have the same thing in the resurrection. The resurrection stories, resurrection was key to early Christianity. So yeah, they all talk about it, but they have very many important discrepancies, which if I had I don't have them all memorized by heart, but it's true. And it's also true that it's very convenient for Jesus to ascend so quickly after he rose. Like, do you have any explanation for that?
Why would it be less convenient for him to say, why wouldn't he?
Because then that would be actual proof. Like, it's easy to say someone rose from the dead and then they left, and it's a lot harder to say, oh, they rose from the dead, oh, and they're still here. It's just like it's just like
sure.
It's like I could say, okay, I saw my brother Jimmy. He was definitely alive, but he was only here for a short time, and so that's like okay.
But
That's
that
a
doesn't
joke,
mean it didn't
right?
happen. It's just unfortunate. Like I guess it would to me, you would have a point if it would have been more natural for some reason for Jesus to stick around, like theologically or something.
There is a reason. There is theologically that like if he really wanted everyone to believe in him, then he could have just stuck around, and then everyone like, well, he's
Forever.
a 2,000-year-old man, so
Well,
I guess
obviously,
he's
okay,
probably
it's a
telling
separate
the
question
truth.
of the hiddenness of God, of like unbelief. Okay, so that's a separate issue. Like, why doesn't God write in the sky?
It's not a separate issue. It's not a separate issue. It's a theological reason. Like if God wanted people to
Yeah,
really
no,
believe
I'm
him,
saying
and
it's a separate issue from like the resurrection and stuff. You're bringing up a separate attack on Christianity. We can talk about it, but it's the hiddenness of God. Like, why didn't
but don't you think that's kind of like interesting in light of like the fact that we have other stories of people raising from the dead? So like Apollonius, like
it was
that
like
was
200 years after Jesus, and I think it's known that it was trying to copy Jesus when they constructed that story.
Okay, so like any story of a person who rose from the dead, which is not Jesus is not the only one, you know, they seem to sort of quickly disappear. And so it's just like it's a pattern of history really for miraculous things to be like always unprovable. And so like this is an unprovable thing that you believe the evidence is more on this side, and I believe not for various reasons. And it's just kind of like I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe it's a separate issue, maybe it's not. But like, can you explain why, given the fact that like so many people saw him, that like why did no one, neither Jew nor pagan, neither Jew nor Greek nor Roman, wrote about people seeing him? So even if they weren't believers, why wouldn't they say like?
I don't think it's remarkable. We have almost nothing from the first century. Almost nothing. Like that's why it's amazing.
Almost nothing in general, or you mean almost nothing about Jesus?
Almost nothing, period. It's just unbelievable how little survived.
That's not true. That's not
no,
true.
I mean,
The Romans took very good records.
Almost nothing compared to.
We have like these interesting things about like events of like Josephus describes Pontius Pilate. He doesn't describe that. He doesn't say, "Oh yeah." I mean,
all right, Josephus is a more interesting point.
Okay, and then we also have another historian who describes just Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate was not a great figure.
But I guess when you're saying why didn't anyone write about it, I'm just saying like 999 times out of 1,000 when someone wrote about it in the first century, it didn't survive. That's my point as far as hardly having anything. Like the great majority of stuff that was written and done doesn't survive. I'm not even saying, and he was a peasant, and very few people knew about it, and it took a while to develop.
But don't you think that if he rose for the dead, if he was around for 40 days, if he was doing all these things, and if 500 people claiming it, I guess what you're saying is not illogical, but it's like it's just like everything is just so convenient to like, and it's kind of like this, like it's not even about like, okay, like is it? It's kind of like, am I illogical for doubting it? Like given the dishonesty of various early Christians, including like you believe that like Mark.
Okay, I need to fix one thing about that. Like it was a normal accepted practice to shape storytelling to your audience. Like that is not
No, that's fine. But in our modern viewpoints, we consider that to be making things up. So like I don't know, dishonesty is not maybe the right word, but like the sort of the proneness.
That's why we do scholarship to find out what is the reliable points, like the tradition that Paul had.
So okay, so since you had a ton of people making things up, and then you had
but they weren't just blatantly making things up. It was ancient biography that was shaped for the person they were writing to, but they didn't just freely make stuff up. And part of the reason we know that is because the Gospels have so much agreement.
Well, actually, you just spoiled two things about the agreement of the Gospels.
Timelines. but that was accepted
But
practice.
you also, okay, for one thing, we do have agreement with the Gospels, but we both agree that that's a lot of this agreement actually came from them having the same source. Are you not do you not believe that like Luke and Matthew used Mark as their source?
I didn't want to use Mark, but people postulate Q, and there's other sources.
Yeah, there's Q, and there's M, and there's L, and the M and the L are independent of Mark, and and so all these things are true, but the like when you're saying, oh, there's so much that corresponds, well, a lot of that corresponds is because it was actually drawing on the same source, and then the other stuff that corresponds is stuff like, okay, Jesus was from Nazareth. Okay, Jesus was a fiery apocalyptic preacher. Okay, Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, and like all these things, we have
think
corroboration.
None of that's true.
In those things, we have corroboration from the independent sources like M and L and Q.
Right.
And then in the thing like resurrection, we do not have corroboration. We do have some similarities, but we have way more dissimilarities in the resurrection story than we do in a particular.
We have at least 4 sources for the empty tomb, if not more. So that's pretty strong corroboration.
So like, why didn't Paul like Paul never mentioned the empty tomb, and he was the earliest one, right?
Well, because it was probably implied when he says he was buried and then he was raised again. Resurrection. Leaving.
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, like, because for one thing, like, he didn't necessarily have to be in a tomb.
So that when they were raised, they would have their body again. So like, buried and raised from the dead.
Okay. The story of the empty tomb is considered important in the Gospels, which were written later, and Paul wrote a ton about Jesus.
And he's not writing a bio of Jesus. He's writing to a church with a specific purpose.
Yeah,
so he's not going to, oh, by the way, let's go into this discussion about the empty tomb because 2,000 years later, it'll be important.
Well, I mean, I thought he was like writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. So he should have done that for my sake.
I know, Manny. I know.
99 sheep. The other one.
We're going. Let's recap what we talked about so far. A little bit of like what.
No. Let's talk about like the integrity of the Gospels.
Points, like what to look into as far as you mentioned
the
Matthew.
That on our own time. Like we're.
Yeah. And just to bring to light for our listeners, I feel like I'm yelling. Sorry. All right, the Matthew account of the saints. That's definitely a weird story.
Yeah.
So I think that's relevant. What were some other?
And like the fact that like
the 500. Hearing to the 500. Resurrection at that time. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's like okay. So like the apocalyptic nature of a large subset of early Jews.
Yeah. So was it natural?
Large subset being. Yeah, I mean, they thought the end of the world was coming. They thought the resurrection was coming at the end of the world. Jesus was their Messiah. They believed he was the Messiah. When he was crucified, and then they saw him again, they were like, holy shit, he didn't die. And they're happy. And like sometimes what happens in the dreams that I've had about my brother Jimmy who committed suicide is that I'm very, very happy that he's come back. I'm super happy. And it's very reassuring to say, oh my gosh, he didn't die after all, and now he can have this cool life ahead of him. Like, and so like all of my family have had the same dreams, and it's documented that when people die tragic deaths, that they are more likely to have visions, and they're more likely to believe these visions.
Would you die saying you saw your brother bodily raised from the dead?
I'm a 21st century person who already doesn't believe in the afterlife. And these are people who did believe in the afterlife, and they did believe that the resurrection was coming soon. The reason they believed the resurrection was coming soon is because they believed that the end of the world was coming soon. And that's because Jesus, their Messiah, told them that the end of the world was coming soon. And if you look at Matthew 24, that's exactly what he's saying.
I still disagree that they think an individual could be raised and that it would affect how they view the resurrection body.
Okay, so do you think that they were like sitting around being like, do you think everybody's going to be raised or just one? Like Jesus came back in the sense of like Jesus was what
No,
appeared to
I'm
them.
saying they would.
And so it's like if one person appeared,
he's exalted in heaven.
but some people did think that it was not a bodily thing, because Paul himself writes in 1 Corinthians 15, trying to deride and mock and rebut like the Christians who believed that Jesus was risen in spirit but not in body.
Right.
So,
So
not
Paul,
all the early not all the early Christians believed that he was raised in body. And even if go on.
well, I'm just saying that proves the point that Paul thought he was raised in body, and so it's like, why did he?
Yes, Paul thought he was raised in body, and I mean, because he thought, okay, so the resurrection in general, according to Paul and according to, I suppose, many of the Jews of his sect, believe that the resurrection would be a bodily resurrection, like in general, the general resurrection. Is that, you would agree with that,
Yes.
right? Okay,
At the
so
end
if
of
they
time,
in
when people
general,
be judged.
okay, and Jesus was predicting that the end of time was coming very soon, right?
Maybe I'll give it to you if you want it.
Yeah, and so then when he's appears, then it's like, okay, he is the first fruits of the resurrection. First fruits, it kind of seems like, whoa, everybody's about to get resurrected. First fruits, it's like bam. And Paul also talks about like things coming soon. Paul also talks about thinking that he would, that he would still be alive, and like he's telling everybody prepare and all this urgent stuff. And you read it differently because it doesn't fit with your worldview, but when I read it, it seems much more naturally to say that, oh, all the early Christians thought the end of the world was coming soon, and only as they started dying off did they start suppressing that belief, because it didn't make sense. So like in John, like you have, and in later traditions, like it's sort of like spoken against that the end of the world is coming soon, and yet like, and you have like this like letter where it's like, okay, to God a day is 1,000 years, and da 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 da, and that is a later letter which many scholars believe was not in fact written by Paul, but it was written by someone posing as Paul, and so he's saying, like, he's kind of reinterpreting what Jesus initially seemed to say. Okay, it's happening within a generation. Like, can you answer that, square peg? Like that, like what do you think Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24? Like, do you think that those were mostly Jesus's words? Do you think they were all Jesus' words? And if so, like, what was Jesus predicting that would happen within a generation? It's one long passage. There's no reason to separate it into these sections as if Jesus was went on a fishing trip in between them. It's one long passage about the end of the world. And so what do you think was happening? What do you think he was predicting that was going to happen within a generation?
Like I said, I'm okay if I think, what if he did predict the end of the world? Like,
so like so like if you did predict the end of the world, and if you thought that was coming in a generation, so then like that would be like a sort of an error that Jesus made.
Well, first of all, he also said, I don't know when it's coming. Later, he said the Son of Man doesn't know, but only the Father knows.
But that also, like, that was in the Gospel of John, which was a later gospel, I believe, but I'm not positive. But also,
I mean,
like,
I would ultimately be okay with
like he. Go ahead.
I mean, so you're trying to say Jesus made an error, right?
Oh yeah, I believe that. But the more important thing is that more thing that's germane to the discussion about the resurrection is that if they believed it was coming soon, then why would it be so crazy to say that their Savior, their Messiah, was the first fruits of this bodily resurrection? It just doesn't seem far-fetched. I mean, you can agree to disagree and all that stuff. It's just like that's my argument, and it makes sense to me. And maybe when we study first century Judaism more, then we will come to a different
I think that it's just
conclusion.
A complete. I mean, in my opinion, it's a complete oversimplification of the situation. That they were not as.
You act like.
They were not.
Okay, why do you say they were not as ready? Why did you say they're not as ready? Like, are there quotes about saying like, whenever someone gets resurrected, it'll be everyone? Like, were you like
Talking
privy to
about the
their
actual
internal
worldview of Second Temple Judaism and how other people
But
react.
there were obviously like there were very distinct sects within that. And so what about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
You have
That
evidence that
sect,
Jesus taught the resurrection was coming to one person earlier, then that would be different.
I don't have it seems very strange that like someone who sees their Messiah, you know, that has after death, which seems like
Two
they're
skeptics saw this and changed their opinion too. Two people who did not believe also saw this and completely changed.
And so like there are other visions in other religions, and there are some skeptics who see these things, and then there are also a lot of Christians who lose their faith. Christians who are actually losing their faith because they're studying the Bible harder. And so you have these things going on both sides, and it's a little bit confusing. But I don't think the fact that a couple individuals had visions like is a testimony. Like we have so many people, like we have like all these UFO da 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 da. I mean like
sure, but I think it's taken all together. I think it's the extremity of the appearances that you have two people that did not believe, that became Christians, that it changed their theology, including including Jesus in the divinity of God somehow immediately, which was super anathema to ancient Jews. Like, where did that come from? And then you have the empty tomb stories with women there.
Like, all that is explained really well within like how Jesus became God, and the idea that there were these divine figures that were in status like close to God was a belief. They were not polytheists, but they were considered to be Jews were diehard
monotheists.
No, they were for a long time. They were what is called like henotheists.
Are you talking about ancient Jews?
Yeah, I'm talking about ancient Jews. I'm saying like
but we're talking about Second Temple Judaism. Second Temple Jews were diehard.
But they did believe in
what
very
caused
powerful.
them to start worshiping?
They believed in very powerful. Very powerful spirits. So like the evil forces were very powerful, and like there were all these demons. There was Satan. There was a person, Satan, who was.
There was other spiritual beings, but not.
Yeah, and there were also people like like the Son of Man. Like the Son of Man is considered to be this really grand, really special servant in the book of Daniel, and in other books that represent first century Judaism and first century BC Judaism, books that didn't make it into the Bible. There is worship of the Son of Man that is done within these books, and these books, it doesn't mean that they were there. It was in the spirit of the age, and the thing is, like it was a gradual thing. And if you read about like this how Jesus became God thing, they did think of him not like they think of it as the Son of God,
right,
and like there's nothing about like Jesus is not.
Who are you talking about that worship the Son of Man?
I'm talking about in the stories of the Son of Man, like from the book of Daniel and from other books that were in the intertestamental period.
People worship the Son of Man. He was God.
And angels were also worshipped in the Old Testament. And so it's kind of like kings were worshipped, and they use that word. Even David was called God. Like let your the Lord said to my Lord, let your enemies until I
think
make them
was
like
always
a footstool.
a confusing verse to the Jews, from what I understand, because it doesn't really make sense, honestly.
Well, the thing is, if you're really interested in all like the possibilities, then we would have to go in. We'd have to read through that Bart Ehrman book.
Let's do it. Let's trade books. I'm in. Let's do it.
And if anyone else is there, what if we let
Yeah, if anyone yours.
Yeah, let's see if Claire and Andrew want to chime in if they're still awake.
Hey y'all, Claire, Andrew, are they there?
And Uh, we also would like audio and video for both of you guys.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
By the way, let me just say for our viewers, in case people start dropping off, I think, Manny, you and I both should put together our own little packet of belief/non-belief of like 1 or 2 book recommendations, and we'll post it like on the YouTube or Facebook.
Sure.
To say, so people know where we're getting our stuff, what is influencing us, and also you can talk about what we might be, doing a book club on. And honestly, if anyone's watching and wants to do like a little book club with us, that would be super fun. So definitely message us, and we'll read, like an atheist book and a Christian book together, because a lot of it is
post-Christian.
Post-Christian. Well,
there are different there's things besides atheists.
But this is.
I'm just kidding.
Because I think if you watch this debate, like you can even tell it's like when you immerse yourself in certain scholarship, that's where you come to your stronger beliefs. It's when you immerse, right, Manny?
Well, I mean, stronger in some sense, but it's also like it's quite a burden to put on like every individual, and I think it's a little bit like it's like we are kind of a little bit intellectually bent.
No, I'm just
saying. I can say that.
For being the reason, like when you're talking about these scholarly intellectual things, it's not a 30-minute debate, that like, oh yeah, you're really right. That it's that like for me, N.T. Wright has proven that resurrection of an individual was a completely foreign idea, and it's like it's hard to communicate that unless you read a
I could try to read that to see, but yeah, and I mean, of course, I'm glad that I've read what I've read. I certainly wouldn't have been able to respond to all of your square holes and your round pegs and all that good stuff. And so I like reading. I do, but I also think that like so much of like what Christians believe about Jesus is related to the fact that he resonates with them, and that his parables and his dedication to the poor and his dedication to his neighbors and his dedication to humility, and his sacrifice, right? Because that's what is that's a theological interpretation of the crucifixion. So I think all of these things are really huge in understanding the belief of Christians in the resurrection. I think they're more important than, for example, the proposition that first century Jews thought it would be all or none with the resurrection. That's just my thoughts on that.
That's fair. The main thing I would want to say is like and I guess I'm thinking of this piece you're talking about the importance of Jesus' parables and stuff is like I think the resurrection is good evidence, but it's just one piece of a much larger picture.
Yeah.
One of it is the truth of Jesus's teaching and how it rings true in self-sacrificial love being worth focusing your life around. And
that's why I'm a post-Christian, because like it's like post-punk or postmodern. It's kind of like I do consider myself a Christian in some sense, and I do meditate on Jesus's words. And
we might want to do a. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
And Claire, we are totally being lame. We invited you to talk, but secretly it was just for eye candy.
But Manny, we should maybe do a debate maybe later on miracles as well, because I think miracles also potentially an argument. Modern day miracles. So we'll have to get to that. Anyway, Claire, welcome to the show.
Speaking of miracles,
long time listener, first time caller.
Hey, I'm here also.
Andrew. Yeah, you guys should definitely talk. Okay, this is Dr. Bear. She has a PhD, and so therefore, whatever she says is authoritative.
Yes.
And binding.
Wow. So wait, what are we supposed to say?
I don't know. Any comments?
That is
Manny did a great job.
The person is supposed to say.
Just
comments, thoughts. Thoughts.
What was on your mind?
Like just like you can also ask us questions if there were like if you want, or you can ask Andrew questions because he's probably feeling pretty bored right now. I think he's gaming over there.
Yep.
Are you gaming?
Yeah, I've been playing video games for the past hour and a half, but I've been listening closely. I had to restrain myself about 15 times from blurting out, and I couldn't not say one thing one time.
That's how you know he was listening. That is true. That is true testimony.
Just in case, I think before y'all talk, I think we've had some recent people come in. Like I think some people are joining late. So Manny and I basically wrapped up the debate. This will be a video that you can watch later if you want to catch the earlier part of it. And we're gonna just chat with Claire and Andrew, see if they're part of our Pensive Peeps society that this whole thing started with. And Manny and I will both be posting some some book just like a package of like
diatribes.
Well, yeah, just like where we get our thoughts, what scholars we read, and stuff like that. If anyone else is interested, sure. We both have blogs, and we're both, the big difference is I'm right and he's wrong. But like if you look past that, it's like we're pretty similar. So anyway, Claire and Andrew.
Andrew, did you have some burning things?
I'll go first. Okay, so I have a question. Okay, so about 3 times Manny referenced like his crazy Pentecostal friend, and he referenced his family's visions of Jimmy. Mm-hmm. And it's just this idea that people have crazy visions, and they all and then they believe that they're real. So I would ask, which of those had the following things true about them? A large group of people all experience the same thing. Wait, hang on. One person.
We don't have 500 signatures. We don't have 500 signatures. We have this tradition
but there's a lot.
500.
Right. There's a lot of things. There's a large.
What's kind of interesting about?
Well, hang on. You talk for about an hour and a half, so let me just get to my point here. You have a large group of people confirming the same thing. Then you have Paul saying 500 people saw it. Most of them are still alive. They live in this town. Go ask them. So he's not saying, oh, these people died a long time ago. He's saying these people are still alive. Go ask them. Go talk to them because it really happened. And then you don't have 500 people willing to die for it, but you definitely have a large number of people willing to die for this vision. So I don't think anywhere in history you found a group collective delusional experience that meet those 3 criteria.
I guess like one thing that's odd about the claim of the 500 is like if that did indeed happen, and like that's a pretty big deal, right? 500, it's the largest number in the New Testament we have of Jesus appearing, right? So it's a big number, and so you would think that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would have received, through the Holy Spirit or through tradition or through something, this story about 500. And so, I don't know. I guess it's a little bit odd to me that they don't mention it. It's not a strong argument. It just
two things really quick. Some scholars think the appearance in Galilee was that it says he appeared to like a mountainside. So at least one of the Gospels could mention it. Secondly, I just looked it up. Paul does mention James. So you have a second skeptic.
Yeah. No, I actually already mentioned that earlier because I looked it up earlier. But
I thought you were talking about the 12. I didn't mention the 12, which it says.
No, my bad. Yeah, I was skimming through it. My bad. Yeah.
So you have another skeptic converted, but one of the Gospels does.
So I mean so one thing is that. I mean that was that supposed to be Jesus's brother?
Yeah, James.
Is that the James? And so it's kind of
who
wasn't I mentioned,
a believer.
Jimmy. Yeah, but it was still his brother. And so Jimmy, he appeared to all of us family, and I don't think he has appeared to many non-family members.
But if James didn't believe in him as a Messiah and wasn't a follower of his, why would he have the vision? That's the question. Just like you had to explain Paul. Then why?
Okay, so the vision in and of itself is not hard to explain, right? I wasn't a believer in Jimmy. No one was a believer in Jimmy. We were his family, and he appeared to us in dreams. And so these dreams were they felt extremely real. And so it's not hard to believe that he would have appeared to James. That's his brother. Maybe James actually felt guilty for, like, maybe, when Jesus says, like, okay, a prophet is not without honor except for in his own country and among his own kin and da-da-da-da-da. So, like maybe James felt guilty. And then when he came in a dream, then maybe James was like, well, shit, my brother was a prophet. Shit, my brother was the Messiah. And I have all these other Christians, that have other Christians claiming to also have seen Jesus. So heck yeah, I'm getting on board and I'm on the Jesus train. Like, I mean, there's a lot of like hagiography, like you kind of make someone into a saint when they die, especially when they die a tragic death, especially when you feel guilt. So it's like there's a lot of positive talk about Jimmy, but
but he was like,
he wasn't always nice. He wasn't always nice, and he was less nice like towards the end of his life. And those stories don't come up often. We talk about the sweet things about Jimmy, and Jimmy was sweet in a lot of ways, but he had some serious mean-spiritedness at various times, and so those never come up. And so that kind of like flipping of saying like, oh man, we sure miss him, and oh man, he sure was good, and da 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 da, and he had a huge following. So even if James and Mary, like when James is like some scholars actually don't believe that James was like an unbeliever in the sense of like Judas Iscariot or in the sense of like Josephus or whatever kind of random Pharisee that didn't believe him. Like Mary is mentioned in the same passage of Jesus, like Jesus' own mother Mary, like who like sang all those hymns apparently when he was being born, is mentioned in the same passage where James and brother are like said to like not believe or something like that.
What's your
I'll
point?
look that up. But anyways, I have been talking a lot. So
James was like one of the prime leaders of the early church, and by the criteria of embarrassment, which I'm guessing Erman talks about, that it would be very strange to invent a story of James not being a believer before the resurrections. So because you're saying that one of your church leaders used to not believe, that would be very strange.
That's not like necessarily embarrassing. It's also, wait. Oh, I mean, it's the same thing with. Okay, no. I mean, yeah. Go on. I'm just looking something up. Why don't we have a chiming in from Claire
Yes.
or Andrew?
Claire?
Surely you had some thoughts during that.
Any questions, Claire?
Lovely.
I have a comment and then a question.
Dang it, we can't hear
And
you.
we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Every time.
It's okay. Just keep trying. Keep trying.
Can you
Keep trying.
That's better.
It's your internet signal. It's not like your microphone, but it's okay. Just keep trying.
I think it might be her mic, though.
All right, go.
It might be her mic. She needs a headset. I have a headset.
Do you have a headset?
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Be closer. Yeah, be closer. It's okay.
Okay.
The resolution of your webcam is quite low.
The what?
The resolution of your webcam is quite low, so no blemishes are visible. Sorry, I should have said that. It was because you were saying you feel uncomfortable about being so close. Anyways.
No, it's just weird.
That's that lack of the Holy Spirit coming out there. Okay, what, Claire?
Claire.
Okay, so as a comment, I think I'm gonna do like a little bit of a tangent, but I remember that I was sitting in grad school class and we were talking about behaviorism and like all the things that they can use to kind of explain like really, really complex phenomenon. And like, cause like, and like I guess I can't remember the exact time, but like in the early 20th century, like the idea that like we actually had thoughts, like really taboo for like certain scientists.
Could you say that whole thing again?
Oh,
sorry, I'm sorry. I just was looking up the passage, and I'm really interested in what you have to say. I'm serious. I'm sorry.
Was the audio bad, or were you just not paying attention?
I was trying to look up these passages. I'm sorry.
Andrew and Robert, were y'all with me?
Yes.
The audio is kind of bad, but I can barely just hear you. So keep talking.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So what I was trying to say is that behaviorism, like in the early 20th century, was used a lot to kind of like over-explain every single thing that people did, because it was really to even think about the idea that we had thoughts, like
that we have free will.
No, just any thoughts at all. Like cognition was like very taboo.
Like any consciousness. I see. We're like much more. Okay, gotcha. Cool.
Like these behaviorists, like thought that it was just more simple to think about everything and trial and error. And so like even like really complex things, they would come up with these really elaborate ways using behaviorism to actually like get to that behavior. But eventually we figured out that it was actually like maybe you could explain it that way, but it actually was more simple and like a better explanation to say.
You're cutting out. You're cutting out.
Hey Claire, could you also type? Could you type and speak at the same time? Because you're a good typist.
Do you have one of these? Do you have one of these white iPhone things you can plug in? Me and Manny are both using it.
Actually, yeah, and speak if you speak close. Speak as close to the mic as you can.
No, I'm busy right now.
I think it's more.
Minutes later.
Dang it! I want to
at least stay.
No.
Yeah. You could type it. Why don't you type it?
I'll try.
Because there's like a Google Messenger typing thing, and we're looking up passages about James, or at least I am. Good old James.
It's interesting. It was fun to do this, but it is challenging because you don't have time to, number one, look up sources and to figure out what you're trying to respond to. And that's why, in some ways, I prefer doing it written. I know that's tough for you, Manny. But
no, I don't mind. I mean, I just think we should keep the folks entertained who are still watching.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying, like, it'd almost be fun to do some written debate slowly.
A live I am.
And then
that's called a Facebook comment. That's called arguing on Facebook.
No, let's not do that.
Good point.
Claire, and then like
you
have
can
another.
Still watch. Can't see you.
So we lost Claire.
There's Al.
She's going to bed. Andrew, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
My only question is, Manny, you said at one point that the gospel accounts do not. Well, okay, Robert Lee, I'm curious to what degree, when Manny is correct in saying that Manny said that many of the details of the gospel accounts do not corroborate, and I really think that that's not true. Like I think it's a minority of things that do not corroborate. But how do you explain that as someone who, I assume, Robert, I know you don't believe in inerrancy, but you do believe that the Bible is God's word. So how do you explain differences, minor differences in the gospel accounts?
Well, first of all, I don't know. I mean, when Manny says like many things, like so many things don't corroborate or whatever, like I think it's really hard to judge that statement because, for instance, the ancient biographers felt free to rearrange timelines, and that wasn't getting something wrong. They just rearranged timelines to fit their story. So,
but for instance, the bird, making a noise 3 times instead of 2, or something.
Yeah. So, but the way, so a lot of those things, like I would not even come close to calling as an error, because that was literally how they wrote biographies back then, when writing as honest as they could. They felt free to not tell in an exact documentary order. Anyway, well, the things that really are genuine discrepancies and stuff, I just think, first of all, I used to say I'm agnostic towards inerrancy, that I could go either way. I think inerrancy tends to die the death of 1,000 qualifications. as they say. And so I think infallibility might be a better word. And
Manny, why are you starting a group video chat in the Facebook chat? Oh my God.
I'm ignoring that.
Sorry.
Don't take that call. Don't take that call.
So
that was an accident.
I mean, I guess the Bible's infallible. Like I don't know. Like all I know is it says it's inspired. It's God's word. It's worthy for teaching. But we also know for a fact it's not automatic writing. It's not like the Quran where God supposedly dictated it. Like no one's ever thought that. So I don't totally know. I know it's authoritative in some way and that God inspired the whole thing. But I think that can mean one person says a rooster crowed twice and the other person says 3 times. And you can call it an error, sure. I mean, so Manny, I don't know if you know this, but
it's a good word for it.
But Manny, you might know this, but there's Bart Ehrman. He started to lose his faith due to something called the problem of Abiathar, where it seems like Jesus might have either Matthew misquoted Jesus or Jesus was wrong about the Old Testament.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know. I'm willing to allow that sort of thing in because God is trying to inspire a written, as Greg Boyd says, a written witness to his covenantal faithfulness. That is what the Bible is, a written witness to his covenantal faithfulness. And Greg Boyd says that the Bible is infallible to that task. So that's why I'm vague on it. And I guess in one sense I don't care enough, though it does matter. I'm not claiming it doesn't matter. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Yeah.
So, but what do you think? So, but what do you think happened? So, I know there's somewhere in the Gospels that there is like a clear contradiction. Like, I'm sure it's.
Well, the roosters, I think, is pretty clear, actually.
Okay, so what do you think happened in that instance? Do you think it was human error, or was it like a scribist error, or like what was it?
I think it's human error. I think, like Matthew might have thought that Jesus said 2 times, the rooster crows 2 times, but it doesn't matter. It's completely incidental to the story, and we never were supposed to think that they were in a trance while they wrote the Bible. They're a human writing it, that it's inspired by God, and the point of it is that Peter betrayed Jesus, not how many times the rooster crowed.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I look at it.
Cock-a-doodle-doo. Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Andrew and Claire, what do y'all think about the rooster crowing different number of times?
Okay.
Can y'all even hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Is it better or is it the same?
It's better.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm getting pissed off. Every time I try to say something, I can't hear me. This happens every time.
Well, you could get a new computer.
Or a headset.
Just get a mic. These things come with the
iPhone. The headset.
I actually will eventually, but I missed a lot of that. I don't know why y'all are talking about roosters, but I think I agree with what Robert just said. Like 2 versus 3 is something that's like gonna shatter my faith. Like that doesn't matter.
Okay, but
guys,
Claire, you had an observation from talking about grad school.
We have 3 thumbs up and 1 thumb down. Sorry. Oh, we have comments.
Dang.
Live chat. Cool.
A thumb down. Ouch.
Sorry.
I don't even know if I want to try to tell that story because it's something I think we're gonna miss half of it.
Okay.
What story? You can tell. Go.
Oh, we start telling.
I'll try to make it quickly. I think that sometimes you can use naturalism to explain almost everything. But in the end, it's actually more complicated than just saying it was supernatural. Just like behavior can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just like behaviorism can be used to almost explain everything, but eventually psychologists figured out it's actually more simple to say we have cognition, even though that was very controversial for a while. And so that was like one point I was make when just talking about how Manny was describing like the Paul situation, like maybe that's what happened, but it actually seems more complicated than the original kind of more accepted explanation.
No, it is. You mean more accepted? Do you mean in terms of like accepted by Christians?
Yeah.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. There's a certain sort of elaborateness to that explanation.
doesn't
But I
always
guess, like,
mean that it's wrong. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, I don't think in of itself, like, just because you can explain something through naturalism doesn't mean that's the way it happened, right? Like,
yeah. And I guess the counter argument that I have is that, like, a miracle is considered to be something like outside of the laws of repeatability. So like we have like the laws like we have like laws of nature which are sort of derived and verified through like repeatability, right?
right.
Like and so like since we couldn't repeat a miracle, and not just that, but since God, like if miracles do happen, they seem to happen pretty rarely, at least miracles that a large number of people agree on. So like, there's a huge segment of the population that believes that, Jesus rose from the dead. But I guess what I'm saying is like, there's not a huge segment of the population that believes that that cat was inflated and that cat came back from the dead. So in terms of the number of miracles that people generally believe, they're pretty small. And so I guess it's kind of like, how are we supposed to talk about the probability of something that is considered totally improbable according to our traditional definitions of probability? I don't know.
If I can chime in, I think that's why it has to be. I think you're totally right, Manny. And I think if all you had was the resurrection, then you probably should discard it. You would probably be like the atheist that I quoted C.S. Lewis say, oh, it's almost like the rum thing happened, but hey, it was 2,000 years ago. How much can that really count? It didn't, something else happened. But I think that's why it has to be a cumulative case. You have this, wow, that's an odd thing. It almost seemed like it happened. And then you add in everything else, all the other arguments for Christianity, and how people find a true philosophy in the teaching of Jesus. And I think it has to be cumulative. I think you have to have other reasons.
Yeah,
Right.
For sure. And then maybe.
Go, Claire.
Okay. So my point was just that, like, just because there could be a naturalistic explanation doesn't mean that's the way it happened. That was my entire point.
That's a good point. I think that you can argue that okay, like, there was a bias against supernaturalism, that like there was a time within the study of Christianity where a lot of scholars didn't doubt kind of the events themselves, but rather they doubted the supernatural nature of the event. So they were still, a lot of them were Christians, but they just kind of, because of the Enlightenment, they wanted to explain things in a naturalistic way. But, a guy named David Friedrich Strauss, he came and said, like, no, we don't have to have naturalistic explanations for everything. We can actually look at the mythological traditions of so many religions, and we can say that these are most likely Christian myths. And, he makes pretty strong arguments for that. And he has a survey of Greek and Roman myths. And we have like, okay, so like a lot, like there's like senators in Rome, supposedly like, all the senators in Rome, agreed that, Romulus, the founder of Rome, was like swept up in a cloud. And some of the more skeptics that came later said, oh no, he was assassinated during that little brief storm. But like the testimony that those senators made is on par with the testimony of the early Christians. It's like, okay, we don't have 20 different senators with signatures. We have accounts that all of the senators agreed that this is what happened, and then we have speculation as to what actually happened. And so I guess, like, what was the story?
Yeah.
So like, like the supposed founder of Rome is like Romulus and Remus, and like I guess they were like twins, and supposedly it's a real person, according to the ancient Roman writers, and he was a great man who founded Rome, which went on to become the mightiest empire in almost all of history. And so they have this story about the founding. So like they like, according to sort of people writing around that time, we have this testimony that yes, all the senators claimed that Romulus was swept, what was basically ascended into heaven after a kind of small sort of dust storm or something
Was
like
that
that.
after 5 years of Romulus being around, who didn't even exist? Like,
I guess I'll need to research into it, but I guess the point is, I mean, the point is that like the naturalistic explanation is also has difficulty with certain really successful empires, and like Genghis Khan like believed that he was like sent from God to be like a scourge upon the earth, and like he went like
Sorry.
we were talking about Genghis Khan earlier.
yeah.
But anyways, like he was a quite successful warmonger, right? Like his empire was larger and spread faster than any other empire. So the naturalistic explanation that he was not sent by God is maybe somewhat difficult to explain, and yet there's so many cases of these like these miracles from different religions which you guys don't give much credence to. Like,
Well,
so like
give us some really, look up one after this of a really good one that's comparable to like the 500 people and skeptics coming to believe.
Okay, so like all the Virgin Mary ones are great, and if you're a liberal Protestant and if you think, oh, maybe these are real, then okay, that's it. You can answer the question. But if you're a traditional Protestant and you think they're not real, then you have to explain those. And there's tons
Can you give
of stories,
us
and they're
a
well
particular
documented.
citing to like that Bart Ehrman thinks is a really good, like give us a, like not right now, I'm just saying after this, like that we can.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I just read it like again, like I reread it like last night. It's just like I don't have names, but I do have like numbers that are greater than 500.
Okay.
And that these visions were accompanied by the sweet smell of roses. And so
I still also I don't have trouble
and they're
believing
people,
that might have happened too. I guess that's part of it.
yeah, I mean, but like if you think it's from God, then that's it. That's fine. The question is finished for you. But if Andrew doesn't, or if Claire doesn't, then it would make my disbelief in the resurrection less ridiculous.
But I think no matter what your presupposition, you do have data to explain. And I mean, this is what we talked about for the first hour. But like the data of like Paul's belief in the resurrection body and all these other would-be messiahs that no one else claimed were resurrected, like, like those sort of things you have to explain. And, you.
Yeah, and I believe that I can. And like, so the other would-be messiahs, maybe they just weren't as powerful personalities. Like maybe their teachings were not as inspirational.
What?
Maybe their followings
they minted coins. This is in like 100 AD. They minted coins that said year 1 because they thought that he was the Messiah bringing. So like,
Was he killed? How did his life end?
I think he was killed by the Roman authorities, and everyone scattered.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I guess like there's like a certain thing about probability that. It's like once something has happened and it seems so unlikely, but it's like okay, so imagine like you were saying, okay, like what is the probability that you would get all heads in a trial of 10 coins, right? Seems kind of low, but if you do it enough times, it is going to happen, and if like you can compare the rise of Christianity to the rise of Mormonism. According to the scholars, the average growth rate was about 40% per generation for Christianity, and that is equivalent to the growth rate of Mormons. And so they're great at being missionaries. That's the thing. They're enforced to be missionaries, and that's one of the biggest differences between Christianity and other religions is that from the earliest days, like it was really important to spread that word, spread it. And so if you're like, maybe those other messiahs didn't teach, oh, spread the word. Maybe those messiahs taught, hey, we're fucking taking over.
Also with Mormonism, 6 of the 11 witnesses to the Golden Tablets left the Mormon Church soon after, and
so
no one died.
But how many? You don't know that.
They saw the Golden.
See, according to Bart Ehrman, we do not have strong evidence that all of the 11 disciples were
not all of them. We know, I think almost certainly at least some of them did though.
So like you said 6 of 11, so maybe with Jesus' disciples it was 5 of 11.
We have no evidence that any of the disciples left the church. In fact, Paul is evidence they didn't, because he said he appeared to the 12. So it makes it sound like the 12 are still followers. You know, it didn't say, you know, they didn't leave. We have no reason to think left the faith after the resurrection.
Actually, yes, there are, because of the doubt tradition. Like, because it's saying, like, and they didn't believe him, and because of their hardness of heart. And so, like, in the stories, he's always going back, repudiate, like he's always saying, like, they looked at the tale as an idle tale from the women, and so it's possible that we did have some doubting followers, and they doubted so much that they abandoned, you know, this thing that they had vested themselves into. And I mean, like, so, like, you know, if they were all doubting and they were upbraided for their doubt, maybe that's because they did doubt, and maybe that's like a tradition that came because it was to help early Christians be reinforced in their beliefs. They're like, oh man, I didn't see Jesus. It's like, well, they did, and they doubted, and then they got upbraided for that doubt. And so, I mean, we don't really know either way about all of the early disciples. We do know that Judas decided to betray him. You know, and it's kind of,
I'm saying it's a very big difference from Mormonism, where 6 of the 11 like founders left and no one died.
But this is also like,
and we know the Book of Mormon. We know the Book of
Mormon
was. We also know the Book of Mormon was plagiarized from Solomon Spaulding's book called. I mean, it's like pretty well documented.
Well, we also know
all of the Book of Mormon was plagiarized.
Yeah, it's also like, I'm not doing like Mormon apologetics here, guys. I'm pointing out, like, there are like highly successful religions, including one founded by a guy named Manny. And
yeah,
like
call me when someone dies for you, Manny.
What's his name?
I'm talking about Manny, Mani.
Okay.
He founded a religion that was, according to some scholars, the largest religion in the world. Like, it spread into the Middle East, it spread into the Far East, and it was a competitor with Catholicism for like filling the gap of paganism. Like,
I mean, we know religions can spread. What's your point with that?
My point is that like you guys are arguing that like the spread of Christianity is something that is so improbable.
I'm not as much. I'm really talking about the earliest, you know, like the people who claim to be eyewitnesses. Because obviously, once you get past eyewitnesses, it's people relying on other testimony, and that's.
But like, do you like someone who reads a lot of the scholarship from both sides? Like, what is your probability that, you know, what do you believe is the probability that all of the authors of the New Testament are actually the people who they claim to be?
I mean, I've heard a lot of back and forth. The important thing is there's been almost zero tradition of it being a different author. We don't know because they.
Why is that important? Like, traditions are found to be false within so many like false religions.
Like all very early, like Luke was always associated with the person of Luke from a very early date, and that's the best we can do with ancient scholarship. I'm fine.
But like
maybe one of Luke.
Like, okay, so Matthew, Mark, and John, like they were all like Aramaic speaking people.
Talk to you later.
Okay, see you, Claire.
Bye, Claire.
Claire, wait. I don't have a crush on her.
Well, man, I wish we had gotten to the empty tomb a little bit more, because, like, I guess one of the big things about the empty tomb is whatever theory you're coming up with, you would have to add on an ad hoc response to explain the empty tomb, as far as I know. So, or you would have to deny the empty tomb, and there's even arguments for it. So what?
Yeah. I mean, I actually need to do some more coding.
Okay.
One thing about y'all's next discussion, if y'all have another one, I have one observation about y'all's next discussion. If you have another one, is it seemed like Manny, or maybe y'all just need to agree on this beforehand, but it seemed like Robert was keeping the whole debate about here are the facts. What is the most likely explanation of the facts? and it didn't. Maybe you had a different vision of the debate, Manny, but it didn't seem like you were keeping it about that. Like at one point you were saying, well, if Jesus wanted us to think he was God, why didn't he just give us more proof, more evidence?
I mean, yeah, I guess that's a valid point, but I guess it's kind of like what I guess Robert is saying like, okay, there are these things that I have to explain, and so I'm saying, okay, well, like, the burden of proof is not all on me, it's also on you, and so it's like, okay, explain how there were like many other people resurrected. That's the day that he was crucified. Explain how he was alive for 40 days. Explain how explain why.
Okay, so you felt you felt like you were just giving other likely explanations of the facts.
Well, I was saying that you have to explain things that are hard to explain in the Gospels as well. And so these things are pretty hard to explain. And so kind of saying like, yes, I may have a hard time explaining this, but I don't have an impossible time. And, you may have a hard time explaining this and you may have an impossible time, but it's kind of like we have these, it's a probabilistic kind of thing, I suppose. Right. And so it's kind of like, well, if you say that my explanation is like so elaborate and it's not obeying Occam's razor and like it's like, well, give me a non-elaborate explanation for why we don't have anything else written about this supposed resurrection of other people on the night of the crucifixion. And and they were like visiting people and stuff.
Well, because that's how ancient texts were. I mean, it's like the fact that we have the amount of accounts we do of the Gospels is insane. Like no historical text has more than one account.
That's not true. I mean, the Peloponnesian Wars
might be bedtime.
Okay, yeah. Good to think, guys.
Hey, before everyone leaves, we should give them something really cool to remember us by, like a dance.
We already did a dance. We should do it.
Can I just turn my video off? Can I just leave?
Well, man, can I just say I'm really glad we did this, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You're worthy.
Yeah, I'm glad too, and I apologize for being so touchy. I just kind of maybe my sort of temperament is naturally prone.
I didn't think you were touchy at all. Honestly, I had to force myself to be more aggressive because I think the two of us, we want to have a good dialogue, right? But we also, we need to like get our points across too if we want to.
You said you had to force yourself to be more aggressive or less aggressive?
More aggressive because like my tendency is just I want to listen.
More. I still didn't hear what you said. More or less? Oh,
more.
Okay, yeah, that's also because I have a tendency to be more domineering in these senses, so that would require you to be forcing yourself, I would say.
But it was good. It was good. I felt like, I mean, we both.
Did you say Robert forced himself on you?
Okay, this is when we really need to hang up. But
this is when it could be a private.
The five people that are still watching.
We're not allowed to make rape jokes when it's being recorded. Oh dear, I'll never
still watching. Thank you for watching, and Manny and I will post like some book ideas and maybe like a long distance book club for all of us to read, one from his side, one from me. So, but yeah, thanks so much for joining in, and Manny, really fun.
Long distance dating books.
Yeah, Manny.
That's my shtick.
Debate to pick up women. So if you watch this and thought Manny looked really fly as he was tearing down your faith, just give him a call. Okay, should we hang up now?
All right, see y'all later.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.